John St. Augustine has, I think this is our third show that we've done over the years. And, he's just amazing. JohnSt.Augustine.com. You can go to his website and read all about his story. It's fascinating. He wrote a best-selling book called Living an Uncommon Life. We did a show on that together. A fabulous story of his journey and spiritual awakening, his career as a radio show host. He's worked with some pretty amazing people. He was the senior producer of the Dr. Oz Show. He helped Oprah and Friends create the satellite radio network, and he's mentored a lot of people. Marianne Williamson is one of them. And he wrote the Power Talk radio show in 2006 that broadcast over 12,500 shows. And he was awarded the MAB Best Talk Show Host in 1999, 2000, and 2001. And in my opinion, still is worthy of it. So I asked John to come on and talk about love. Why? Because I think he's got an excellent perspective on it. He's an expert, and I can't wait to hear what he has to share with all of us. We're going to talk about staying grounded when we're in love. We're going to talk about what that means, how we can do it, and we're doing it over Halloween, and this is why, because, and this is a big secret, and I'm going to tell everybody, because Halloween, astrologically, is an amazing time. We have what's called a thinning of the veil. We have this amazing kind of astrological alignment with all of these amazing protons and plasmic events. And so when we're running around in costume, trick-or-treating, and having all these scary, gory, bloody movies playing, and we're all afraid and getting into this kind of weird, funky place, we should instead be outside under the stars looking up and thinking about love and thinking about what that means and emptying ourselves of what we've thought it meant and trying to find some kind of relationship with nature and starting to regrow that. It's an amazing time to be alive, guys. So hopefully John can help guide us through this crazy thing called love. Hi, John.
No pressure on the big guy, huh? Are you kidding me?
Well, I mean, come on. It's seriously, who else would be better to talk about this except you and John Denver?
Well, that's true. I'm sitting here listening to you talk about my career, my life, and that's kind of the short version. I have a talk next week here in Chicago, and they asked me for my bio, and I have 3 bios. I have the documentary PBS version, which will take you 12 days to read. And then I have the medium version, which is kind of like the I don't even know if they make these the movie of the week. And then I have the condensed version, which is, 22 minutes long. So they're all really something. And whenever I hear, I get an introduction, so depending on where it's at, 2 things happen for me, Hillary. Number one is I kind of just am so disconnected from everything I've accomplished. My parents wouldn't believe it. I'm one of the least likely guys to, quote, succeed. Not because they were bad or anything like that, but I came from a regular home on the northwest side of Chicago, and I didn't have any major serious influences that would have, predicted what I would be doing in the world. And the second thing is, it sounds like an obituary, because I'm not done yet, but it does sound like, oh my God, what else did he do? And what did he, so, but listen, I got to say a couple things too, because I remember before you were on radio, I remember getting a couple emails from you, I think when you were just starting, and asking for some advice. And what I find wonderful and interesting and important and powerful is that you've carried on. I know, like with a lot of things, we have our different routes that we find to do our work in the world. But, the fact that you, too, these few years later, are sitting somewhere tonight, taking an hour out of your time on the planet and putting things out into the world that people all over the planet can hear it. A lot goes along with that. And I think when we talk about love, that's one place to start, because you love the calling in all the ways that you do it. You're an adventurer, you're an explorer, you're a metaphysical master. You have all these things. Some of the stuff you do on Facebook, I need like a slide ruler to figure it out. But
do you know that I'm also a code master?
Well, yes, you are. And, according, so I'm sorry I missed that. But, the bottom line is you love this. This is a love you have for what you've been called to do. And I think one of the things, as I was thinking about when you asked me, it's been a couple, 3 weeks since I knew we would do this tonight. website, and I started thinking about all the pieces of love and all the stuff goes along with it. One of the first ones was the love of yourself enough to love what your calling is. And I think until you love yourself enough, the calling really doesn't find you. And I have a lot of people email me, as thanks for mentioning the website, I write this blog called Notes from the North, and it's my way of getting my brain pan drained pretty much every other day or so. And I get email from people, the number one thing I hear is I don't know why I'm on the planet. I don't understand what I'm doing here. And I try to subscribe to them to say, well, you really got to stop looking outside at all the stuff that is not you. And you have to start taking out the splinters that have been shoved in us since we got here and sometimes before we got here. And pulling those splinters out leaves a hole. And what you fill that hole with determines, I believe, to a great deal how you live your life. And if you pull those splinters out and fill them with things that just keep the toxicity going, you're not going to get anywhere. But love, self-love, love for each other, love for being alive. I mean, just think about it. The odds of being born are like a bajillion to nothing. And we come to this planet, and we think we're having a bad day. I find that fascinating. So I just thought it would be a good leap-off point. I'm so proud of the work that you do. I'm so proud of who you are. I've watched you evolve and grow over the years doing this radio thing. And every time someone like you stands up and your consciousness expands to the next level, it's like that old barrel of monkeys game I grew up with. I don't know if you did, but you pull one monkey out. Your objective is to keep hooking the monkeys to get them all out of the barrel. And I think that love is the thing that hooks other monkeys and gets them out of the barrel.
I agree. We're having a little problem with your sound. I don't know what kind of phones you're on, but it's breaking up. So you need to be just the right amount of distance away from the speaker.
I'm right here. Is that any better?
Oh, and I wanted to mention, now you have a Hillary Raimo bio, the version. You have the Hillary Raimo version of your bio, and please feel free to use it.
Well, HR used to mean human resources. Now it means Hillary Raimo. So.
Well, I'm listening to your words, and my mind is going, oh, yeah. And, I do talk about love a lot. For those of you that are listening that follow me around on Facebook and stuff, I talk about it a lot. I bring it up all the time. I write about it on my Yin Factor blog. And, the minute I get upset or angry or sad or any other spectrum of the human experience, everybody goes, but wait, you always talk about love. It's like, okay, yeah, I do, but I'm still human, and I still get angry, and I still get sad. And, I think love is more of a foundation. Don't you think, John? You kind of have to have it as a bedrock. It's like a choice. You're either going to see life in a nice way, or you're going to see it in a really crappy way, and then you're going to just have that day happen accordingly. And it doesn't mean you don't have any problems. It doesn't mean you don't get upset. It doesn't mean that you can't have access and free roam through the rest of the human spectrum of existence and all that means. Have you ever had that happen to you, where you kind of feel like people don't accept any other emotion except love sometimes?
Well, sure. When you, meaning me, one of my greatest challenges is to not use the word you so much, because for me, when I say you, I'm talking about me, and we do this. Humans do this, the collective you or the collective everybody. So for me to have done the work that I do and continue to write the books, apparently people think I never have a bad day. I write the books because when I have a bad day, I read my own stuff, And so climbing the, quote, ladder of success, whatever that means, brings along with it an illusion that I got it always together and all these things are perfect. And the truth is that the old saying goes, we always teach what we need to learn the most ourselves. So for me, I had this thought earlier, which kind of falls in line with what you were talking about, is that, we're all born unconditional love right out of the gate. There isn't a baby born today anywhere in the world, in any circumstances, that does not come in with unconditional love and joy. That's how we're born. And then we are taught the conditions of love over a lifetime. And then we wonder why life gets so difficult, and relationships are difficult, and our relationship with ourselves is difficult because we have all these conditions on it. And then when we have that awareness or awakening, however it comes about, could be a terrible thing that really shakes our life or something that happens gradually, once we have that awareness, we set about trying to undo what's been done and get back to unconditional love. So we live our lives a certain way, come in one way, and then we spend the rest of our lives trying to get back to where we started. So it wears people out. And I think that the many versions of who we think we are is part of the challenge.
That's a good point. But how do we know love if we don't know what's not love? It's almost like we have to learn. I don't know. I know for me, I have to learn the opposite of love sometimes so that I know love when it comes into my life, and I can tell the difference between the two things, whether it's, and in the new age, and I call it the new age industry for a reason, because it is, I see a lot of people talking about this concept, but it becomes kind of like a shield, I guess, or some kind of, potato sack over your head, and you just don't kind of see the realities of what's happening when that happens. I mean, you're kind of in it, you're experiencing it, you're going through it, you're pausing your way through it, however you deal with it. And then when you come out of it, when I come out of it, it's kind of like, the rain clouds are clearing, and I see, I feel the warmth of the sun again, and okay, let me reflect and learn the lessons that I need to learn out of that experience. And then I find gratitude helps with that experience, because if I hadn't had that experience, then I wouldn't be grateful for the lessons that I'm able to learn because of it. And I think when that happens, we move into a different relationship with love, and we start to realize that it's not just about the hearts on the Valentine's Day cards or the chocolates or, the I love yous after every conversation that you have with people. It's something else. It's almost like a cosmic quality that's built into the human species that we are absolutely in need of more. What do you think when you look around this world today and you look at the news headlines and you see all this stuff happening and you go, what the heck's going on? And then you talk about love and everybody goes, what? But everybody's dying everywhere. I mean, how do you suggest people look at that? I mean, what do you tell them when they come to you and say, John, what do I do? The world is falling apart. No relationship. I can't find love. What am I supposed to do?
No pressure on the big guy, huh? Okay.
I told you this was going to be a very high-pressure show.
Yes. And so, yes, I expect nothing less than that from you. So here's a couple of things. Our lives right now are very much a matter of perspective. In my grandfather's time, he came over to this country with $19 in his pocket and made a life and all that kind of stuff. But he also had to live through World War II, and horrible things were going on then. There's always been things that have been going on, but we don't have the luxury of being there at that time. It's called history. So we tend to think history starts with the day we were born. And we start looking at our lives from that point forward, going, look at this experience I'm having. Oh, my God, isn't this horrible, or fill in the blank. But the truth is, ever since our long ago ancestors disagreed and threw stones at each other, we've been hurting each other, and that's the truth. And I like to dig into things and call them what they are. I read a story yesterday. We all saw these beheadings happen with these terrorists, and it's shocking and horrible and devastating. And the lower end of the gene pool hasn't gotten the memo that that's not what you do to other humans. But in New York yesterday, it happened to a woman by her son. And today it happened in Ohio. And it's been happening since somebody with a sword cuts off a human body part. So when we look at these things, we tend to run them through our own belief systems, whatever those may be. And if they line up with our belief system, because you have to have a lot of people agree to cut somebody's head off, or just one. So somewhere in there, the wiring gets to a point where this is an agreement that's made, this is how I'm going to act. Now, most of the world is not like that. Most of the world has crawled and pulled itself out of the muck and mire and says this is not a way to live. It's gotten smaller and smaller. We don't dump burning oil on people at the front of our house anymore. So on one hand, there are horrible, horrible, unbelievable atrocities happening every second of the day around the planet. And on the other hand, they always have. And so when people come to me and ask me a question like you just did, what do you do with this? I think of all those people that created massive change based on love. like Gandhi and Martin Luther King, and you could name, Mother Teresa, and the list goes on, some very famous, some not. And I say that force is equal to or greater than the atrocities that go on in the world. And we all have the capability and the ability, and more importantly, Hillary, the responsibility to do what we're supposed to do while we're here, or you can just think you're a cosmic mistake. But in order to do that, you have to find out who you are first and love yourself enough to go put it out in the world. Listen, if there's anybody listening to the show that knew me 25, 30 years ago, they wouldn't believe the stuff coming out of my mouth right now. Because I've evolved from the guy I used to be through difficulty, challenge, pain, good things, bad things. And it takes a conscious shift to do that. And most people, unfortunately, for most, not by their own fault, have not either been taught or shown how to do that. And on one hand, it's great to have these industries that have great books. I've done written books and stuff too. But self-help books, you don't buy for other people, you buy them for yourself. That's why they're called self-help. And finding out who you are is really your only job in the world. And when you do that, and you love yourself enough to do that, everything else starts to fall in line. And so turn off the television and watch this stuff repeatedly over and over again that you can't do anything about. Pull back and focus on the immediate sphere of influence you have, which is you and maybe your family, your kids, whatever, and spend the time with that instead of spending all the time going, oh, my gosh, look at what's happening to the world. I can't change that. What you should be thinking is, oh, my gosh, look what's happening in the world. I can't let it change me.
And yet it is changing you, because like my micro experience of, if I didn't know that duality, how would I be who I am today? Same thing goes with the collective on the macro scale. If we as humanity didn't know that aspect of humanity, would we know the other aspect of humanity? Would we know Gandhi if we didn't know Hitler? That kind of thing.
Right. Well, I get you, but my point is, if it changes the inner core of love to one of apathy or hate, that's the change I'm talking about. We come in with this core of, I think, we call it love as a human. It's that vibration, and we have that, and it's like this golden nugget that's in us, and it slowly gets knocked out over a lifetime. And my point is that if you sit and watch all this stuff that's going on, and that light inside you goes out or gets cold or glosses over, then you become that. So I agree with you. You got to know one to have the other. There's no question. But if you look at it and go, oh, my gosh, it doesn't matter what I think, or it doesn't matter. Yes, it does. There are, 380,000 babies born every day. 158,000 some odd people die every day. There's this constant coming and going of a conveyor belt of possibility. And for me, I've always thought that we kind of come in on time and we leave on time. And even though it may not look that way to us because we forget, but I keep that in the forefront of my mind because it keeps me moving. So I realize that, I have a shelf life. Somewhere in my DNA is coded in my expiration date. I don't know what it is. I know when I got here, but nobody knows when they're leaving. We all know when we got here, but we don't know when we're leaving. And when you look at the sphere that we get to live in, the Ethernet of what our experiences are, and either it brings us closer to the source from which we came or pulls us further away. And you need to see those dualities because each one of those is a choice. So like you said, without Hitler, a lot of things would have been different. Maybe they shouldn't have been, but it caused an influence in the world that changed the world. And sometimes, if not all the time, you need polar opposites for progress. So it'd be nice to wake up tomorrow, we all sing Kumbaya together and dance around the planet and do a Coca-Cola commercial. We'd like to teach the world to sing. But love in life is hard. And I'm not even talking about relationships between people, which is, something we get into. But the truth of the matter is, for me, this whole ball of wax, well, it's not even a ball of wax, but this blue ball we hang in space crawling around, we are as interconnected to every single thing on the planet as it is to us. And, without having the love and respect for even the ball that keeps us alive is a disconnect. So you start with that, and you start with all the ways we can find these disconnects. You have to find things to connect to. So those things do have a purpose. But if that purpose is missed and you become apathetic, you just sit around and wait till your shelf life expires. And I don't think that's why we're here.
No, I agree. I was just redoing a little research recently about the brain and how it works. And one of the things I found fascinating was how PTSD works. We all know basically what that means. We have some kind of traumatic experience happen to us. We relive that. Our body's biochemistry relives that. We have all kinds of different physical, chemical responses inside the body that tells us, we have to be afraid. We're still in this situation, et cetera, et cetera. And it's gotten a lot of attention. Medical fields have definitely opened up to that. So if we can be so dramatically affected by our trauma, can't we then be traumatically the opposite of that, completely healed through our love memories? And if we start to, so what I did was I started to understand, or at least look through the science that I could relate to or resonate with, that talked about how this biochemistry effect happens when we start to feel love, literal love, like the in love feeling. We've all felt that at some point, in love with the person, a pet, a child, whatever. And as we experience that emotion, it goes through and sets a chain reaction domino effect through the body that creates this entire biochemical process through us. And so if we start, and I think what happens when we forget love or we don't add it in there is because, we have gone through whatever we've needed to go through for whatever reason. And our body just hasn't had the triggers. It hasn't had the on button pushed. It hasn't experienced that emotion going through the brain, through the body, through the biochemistry. And so like anything else in the body, like any muscle that doesn't get used, if you don't use the love chemistry, it doesn't turn on. So once we start to remember our love memories, and once we start to go back to, and because everybody spends so much time wasting, I believe, on arguing what love is. What is love? But what happens when you go into yourself and you start to remember, we start to remember that, memory of Christmas and 19, whatever, where we got our favorite gift whatever it is, it starts this fascinating process of biochemistry through the body that actually lights up neural networks in the brain that have been kind of dormant because we haven't gone there. And I said, that's really fascinating. So if we literally talk about love, being in a state of love, going into a situation in a state of love, or going into a business meeting in a state of love, or meeting somebody for dinner in a state of love, we actually have that kind of biochemistry going on, and it creates pheromones, and it creates kind of like a tree creates that chemical processes in the air around it to alert and communicate with other trees and other plant life around it. And I said, wow, that's like if everybody really understood the basics of how this works, literally, physically through the body, it kind of takes on a whole different tone of what love is. So if you're in love and you're walking through the grocery store, everybody goes, my God, John, you're glowing. You must be in love. Well, you are. You're in love, literally the state of. And instead of PTSD, instead of drawing up the traumatic memories, you're drawing up this, whatever you want to call it. And you're actually telling the biochemistry, the etheric chemistry of other people that interact with you as you walk by somebody in a grocery line or whatever, and you're in that state of love. That person's, we call it an energy field, but it's actual biochemistry field can actually detect it. And it starts to go, oh, even if we're not consciously thinking of it. And I said, that's really an interesting concept. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, I think you're very smart. Number two.
Thank you.
Number two. Are you blushing? Good.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Number two, I've never been told that I've been glowing in my whole life. So let's just set that right off to the side. And number three, talking about the blueprint, the mechanics, and the alignment of all this is critical. But I also learned that, humans are the youngest species on the planet. And when you look at what it takes for people to change, for people to assimilate information, the last book that most people have read, especially men, is their high school yearbook, and 3/4 of that is pictures. You're asking people to do something that is near impossible. and here's what and I'm agreeing with you, but I also want to take this another level deeper or broader or wider, that everyone has a DNA download. We don't just handle our own stuff. We have to handle the stuff that float downhill from everybody in front of us, who are more than likely, with painting kind of a broad stroke here, more than likely, Hillary, less conscious about life than we are. They lived shorter lives. They didn't have the kind of nutrition. They were separated. They didn't have the internet. So, we have all these people who are before us. I'm not saying there weren't some brilliant humans, because there were. But for the most part, if I look back at my family, I'm the first one that went out of college. I'm the first one that did this and the first one that did that. And so I can look at my evolutionary chain of the men, especially that came before me, and every one of them had large knuckle sores because they dragged their knuckles all the time. There was no other thought as to having a beer, going out and do whatever and get in a fight. So I had no reason to think different until life came along and offered me opportunities to think different, whether it was about love or relationships or a job or whatever, because my DNA was already programmed. So when we say, or you say, if we could just get everybody to realize this, that'd be freaking great. But I'm betting but that's not going to happen, because there's 7 billion and growing. Mm-hmm. But I also know, as you do, that critical mass is important. And critical mass, for anybody that doesn't know what this means, it's really simply. Critical mass means that back in like 1988, maybe 89, you couldn't go to a wedding in North America and everybody knew how to do the Macarena and never took a lesson. And the Macarena started in Brazil, and pretty soon it got on TV, and everybody learned it, and they'd play the song, and we'd all do the lemmings, line up, and do the Macarena. Democrat, Republican, independent, black, white, yellow, red, men, women, children. Everybody knew how to do the Macarena. And they didn't argue about how to do the Macarena. They just did it. Pretty soon critical mass came. And if you say now, 20 years later, Macarena, hey, Macarena, on the street, you'll see somebody start doing all moves.
That's true.
Right?
True,
right.
Yeah.
So repetition and things like that, we're pretty shallow creatures unless we aren't. Meaning, I have this thought that's been with me for a very long time, that all this stuff that happens, especially with love around it, connected to love, are opportunities in disguise to find out who you are through other people in our lives, and that these things are in disguise because we wouldn't know what to do with them if they weren't. So we got to disguise it in the Macarena. You got to hide the vitamin in the liver sausage. We have all these distractions. We have all these ways of connecting to each other. We have all these ways to interact. And yet, as we have been squeezed together as humanity, especially on something like social media, if you squeeze oranges, you get orange juice. You squeeze tomatoes, you get tomato juice. You squeeze a bunch of people together, all kind of crap comes out. And this is what we see, and we're dealing with this stuff. So, one of the great things I've learned, and I've been trying to learn more and more, because, you and I chat on Facebook, and so does 74 million other people, is that you see reflections of who people are as they put up, as they run it through their strainers. And, I'm of the mindset at this point in my life, if I don't like something, I don't have to dissect it or deal with it or figure out why, I just delete it. And I came across something today that stopped me from doing that. And it was a post about Dr. Oz, who you mentioned that I have worked with for 4 years. I like them, great guy, and I think the world of them. And, we're both rhinos, and we've butted head many times, but have a lot of respect. And this post basically said, I'm not going to say who it came from, but here's what the post said. Dr. Oz claims Islam. I have no respect for this man.
He claims what? I'm sorry, you broke up for a second there. He claims what?
Islam. That's his religion. Islam.
Oh, he claims that he's Islamic?
Yeah.
He's Muslim? Okay.
Well, he was born in Turkey.
So what was the person's problem? What was the problem? He just didn't like that?
Well, apparently, and I just looked at this little post that said, Dr. Oz has claimed Islam. I have no respect for this man. And then this whole thread goes off of all these people jumping on, and he's this and he's that, and, Islam's taken over the Christians. And I watched this unfolding of this, And none of these people, for sure the person who put it up online, never met Mehmet, no connection, never, so I spent 4 years with the man, stayed at his house, played with his kids, went on vacation, all this stuff. And he has saved countless lives on the operating table. He does all these good things. And so when I saw this, instead of deleting it, I did something very uncharacteristic. I wrote, I'm trying to understand your point, because I wanted to come from love. And the reason I did this is because it would have been easy to feed the other part of me that said, F you, and blow these guys out of the water. But I thought, I need to come from love on this. And that's a different kind of love. That is a love that says, I love Mehmet Oz like a brother. I love what he does in the world. I love him enough to say, let me understand this, because perfect example, you talk about the micro and the macro quite a bit. On a micro level, the guy that put this up, something pops up and says, I connected to Islam and Dr. Oz. Bad. Islam bad. Dr. Oz bad. Now, he's probably known as Dr. Oz the whole time but never figured out that he was Muslim. And I thought, that's the problem with the world in a micro snapshot right there. Mm-hmm. So I could say I know people who are Catholic that beat their wives.
Oh, my gosh, I didn't hit that button.
That was funny.
That is funny.
I laugh. I'm saying Catholic. I said I know people who are Catholic that beat their wives and we get a laugh track. What is that all about?
Oh, man, that was weird.
So anyway, yeah. So anyway, all this stuff is going on. And
so what happened, though? What happened after you commented?
20 hours later, I've never seen any more. It's just hanging there. Because
it's just hanging there. You stopped it, so you commented and it stopped the flow, or it just kept going?
No, it stopped it. And all I said was, Mark, I'm trying to understand your point. You'll never know who Mark's last name is, but Mark, I'm trying to understand your point. I've known this guy on and off for 25 years, and I could see where this would come from in him, but I've also seen the same guy post Wayne Dyer quotes. We all must love and honor each other. I'm thinking, this is the problem with the world and each of us.
Wow, that's
exactly
amazing.
What it is.
That's amazing. So, it's amazing because it's so out there, saturated, that, if you have a conversation with anybody, a stranger on the street, my kids will come home from high school and, their friends are all talking about Ebola and terrorism and, just there's a lot of fear running through people because and, for whatever reason, and the judgments that they make based on the affiliations that we have, or I know a lot of Muslim people. I have a lot of Muslim friends, and they're great people. It's not Islam. We're going into the whole Jewish German kind of conflict, where everybody's just bad because you are this, period, right. And that's silly.
Which when I hear that, says we haven't evolved, we haven't learned the lesson. And lessons in life, whether they're on the micro or the macro, using your words, which are great, they're repeated until we learn them, whether it's one-on-one with a spouse or a significant other, or if it's as a community or as a nation or as a world. These things keep repeating themselves. We're the ones that create it based on what we believe, and we keep recreating it over and over again. And, that's that old, I wish I could remember the exact line out of Cold Mountain, which was a great movie. And she says something like, the men create the rain, and then they complain because they get rained on. We do all this to ourselves. There's no, as far as I know, which is more in your line of work, that there's some big alien conspiracy making us act this way.
It's my line of work.
We have, in a simplistic term, we have the black wolf and the white wolf inside us, both vying for our attention, and they're both hungry. And the one we feed the most is the one that shows up in the world the most. So, I just want to jump back real quick because this is, I think, is critically important about what you said earlier about PTSD. I know what that's like. 2 weeks after I got married in 1986, my wife and I at the time got hit by a drunk driver, broadside, had to cut me out of the car, no pulse done. 6 weeks later, go to court, and the guy who hit me gets off with $20 fine. I have to sue the guy, and sitting in court with no recourse, my body totally rebelled. And that night, I had to be taken out in handcuffs from my home because I was having these panic attacks. I've never had anything like this in my life. And the long and short of it was, this went on. I ended up in for like 3 or 4 days, in a place where they have rubber on the walls, and they figured out real quick this wasn't permanent. But my nervous system, just like a computer, had overloaded, and it didn't know what to do with it. So, the traditional treatment would have been and was, let's talk about all these things that are going on and how do you feel, and then we'll give you some medication. And after about 6 weeks of this, I thought, this ain't going to cut it for Johnny. And I started to learn about the mind-body connection. And I started to learn that the mind is not only a receiver, but a broadcaster, and its immediate imprint or its immediate place to broadcast is the body. Before it ever gets outside of us, it can affect what's going on, obviously, in this machine. And I'll never forget the night that it all shifted. I was working third shift as a hotel security guy. I had lost my job, and things were changing, all this kind of stuff. And I sat there, and I started to realize that I could mentally, when I could get this feeling of anxiety come on me, which was overwhelming. I felt like, like the Incredible Hulk, basically. I would turn into this raging beast with all this unresolved stuff coming up, not just from the accident, but every splinter that had ever been shoved in me since the day I got here were all being brought to the top, and you don't know what to do with them, and it's tough. So anyway, I started to be able to take a metal bar in my mind and see it bend, and I bent it into all kind of twisting pretzel-like circles until the feeling left, and I was able to bend it back and forth and literally began to control and undo my own PTSD. And here's what I've learned about that the human mind does not know what reality is. There's no concept. When we look outside, everything's upside down. It's what happens behind our lenses that transcribes it right side up to the brain. So we actually see the world upside down, and when it comes through our system, it flips the other way around. So it's amazing technology, but it doesn't know what reality is. And so it becomes very subjective. And a simple way to prove that is tomorrow's Halloween, and people have been watching creepy movies all week. I can't sit and watch Night of the Living Dead. It scares the crap out of me, right? So I'm 55 years old, but when I watch it, I'm 12, and my hands start to sweat.
Someday I think you should videotape that and put it on YouTube. I bet you would have 1 million hits.
What's that?
But just you watching a scary movie looking like a 12-year-old kid.
Well, yeah.
I'm being serious. Okay, so.
Yeah, serious.
Well, but here's the thing, John. It's like you had this experience and you pulled yourself out of it. What did people think of you as you were going through it? What was your experience in interaction with others around you closely, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah. It depends on who you ask. My wife at the time thought this was really difficult. I slept on the floor for a year with the lights on. Every night we would pull the top mattress off the bed and put it in the living room, and I'd turn on Back to the Future. And I had to watch it every night for a year to fall asleep. I needed something. I needed a schedule. I needed a rudder. And so that was a very difficult time. So if you'd ask her what it was like, it was very, very challenging.
Mm-hmm.
Other people I worked with that knew what was going on, thought I was like Houdini. How is it possible that you don't need to go take all these horse pills anymore? Then of course, it transcended into other things. If I can get over this with my mind this way, what else can I create? And I think in some ways that was some of the early thoughts that I had about what am I going to do with my life? Am I just going to drag my knuckles like everybody came before me, or I'm going to love myself enough to stand up a little higher? And here's what I think, too, and I've seen it. Both my kids are more evolved than I was at their age. And I believe it's like we have these chain links that we're all connecting to the people before us. And the link of us today, we have a choice. Either you break the chain or you add a link. And if you break the chain and create new evolutionary pieces, those kids can pick up on that. My kids will never know what it was like to grow up like I did unless I keep creating that. And I did. So now they evolve, and then they evolve. So, I mean, we're on this evolutionary arc. And the key thing is love of yourself, and, of course, the love of the people around it, which is always very challenging, difficult, and wonderful.
So that made me think. I'm thinking.
I don't get a chance to do very often.
I do. And you make me giggle a lot on my show. I
Okay.
listen back to our archives. I always laugh. You know, when you had that accident and you went through that for the whole year, was that before your career really took off into superstar status, or was it during the beginnings of that?
That was 10 years before.
10 years before. So you went through this and your mind learned something, and you said something that I caught, and it was, you know, I learned how to do that. I'm paraphrasing here. You learned how to do that, and you challenged yourself to see what else you could do based on that kind of creational energy. So you had a really powerful moment there.
Yeah, you know, going back to it, how many people are, you know, I don't call them accidents anymore. I call them incidents, because there's a difference. An accident is something that's not supposed to happen. It's gotten to the point in my life that I see all these things on the landscape of my experience that they're all supposed to be happening, so I can understand what the heck I'm doing here. And so they become incidents, and that, you're exactly right. That's a perspective shift. This goes back to what you said 20 minutes ago. If everybody could understand, we could change things. Well, everybody doesn't understand. I know brilliant people I went to high school with. They're on the same bar stool they were when I left 30 years ago. And they're going to stay there because there's no reason for them to get off, no matter how painful it is. We are creatures of habit. They're not all good. But for me, all the elements of my life, the influences, I started to see them differently. And when you look at things in a different way, they begin to take on a different hue, a different tone, a different tenor. The experience changes. And you can go along with them. And so I find that all very, very fascinating, you know. And so a lot of people are, you know, in a car accident, and they think nothing more of it. Boy, I was lucky to be alive. And you go, let me really break that down. I'm lucky to be alive. What are you going to do with that? And the factor of love in all this, you know, there's a forgiveness thing in here, because we are human. We have human and being. We're both. We're sometimes too much human, not enough being. But the forgiveness factor, which is just really a word, a release of energy, it took me 8 years to really to see the guy that hit me as a godsend. 8 years to see that. And
I just saw it in 8 seconds. I saw it in 8 seconds because your story and how you have translated your experience inside of you and shared it with all of us. It's I don't know. I just see a really clear way that you pulled yourself out of that biochemical type physical thing I was talking about earlier and retrained your brain based on a different routine that got you out of it.
Right. You know, there's a principle in kinesiology, which I'm sure you know what that is, but for those that don't, it's really the study of human movement. And kinesiology has a principle, SAID, specific adaptation to imposed demands. So that means your body, my body, anybody listening's body, adapts to the demand placed on it. If you lift weights, you get muscle. If you go swimming, your body looks a certain way. If you're a gymnast, you look a certain way. So the body adapts. You sit on the couch all day and do nothing and eat, you know, Oreos, it'll adapt to that. I am of the mindset that not only does the body do that, but our spirit, our brains, our reality, our emotional body, all those other pieces that are mostly unseen do the same thing. So if our body adapts to the demand placed on it, then our minds would have the same opportunity. So whatever demand placed on the mind, if you don't adapt to that, or if you do, that's a matter of consciousness. You could sit down, turn on CNN, which stands for constantly negative news, by the way, and watch that for 14 hours. And it's like looking through a keyhole. It's like looking through a keyhole. It is. And I've been in the media 20 years. I've produced it, I've directed it, I've hosted it, I've created it. And I'm saying that all that you see on something like that is produced reality. But looking through the keyhole, our brain adapts to it, our mind adapts to it, says this is what's real in the world. This is the truth. No, it's produced reality. And so you have to have a conscious shift and break away from that stuff. And then people will say things like, well, how do I know what's going on in the world if I don't watch TV? That tells me there's not a whole lot going on in your life. And so if you have enough love to turn that stuff off and find what's going on in your life, you'd be amazed to see what you find in the world, truly.
So forgiveness, you mentioned forgiveness. We had a person submit a question in our chat room, and John says, you are talking about love. What about forgiveness? So forgiveness is a form of love once you
Sure.
get to that stage, right? You have to get to that. And, I really want to stress that, because I've been through some stuff recently, and you're aware of some of it. And it's one of those things where you have to really be honest with yourself and just let yourself go through it until you can get to that point. Nobody can tell you you have to do it now, or you should do it, or you should be over that by now. You really just have to get to the point where you are okay with the forgiveness. And once you get to that state, then it's right for you. What do you tell people when, that happens, that situation? Well, you should be over it by now. You should forgive, but the anger is still there. The hurt is still there. I mean, you're pretty clear about your story when you talk about how you've gone through things and your challenges and how you have come out with them. And that's what makes, I think, your work so powerful, is because people can relate to the reality of the humanity of it. The being, you mix it into a way. It's not all Pollyanna-ish type stuff where, you're floating on a lotus in a mud field and you're not facing the
floating on a lotus?
Yeah, floating on a lotus. The lotus grows out of mud. And I always say, sometimes there's people floating around on their lotus pads and they don't see some of the stuff that's behind them because they're kind of out of touch with the reality of what's really going on inside of themselves. And so when I get mad, people, oh my God, Hillary's mad. But if I don't express that, then I'm not being authentic to who I am in the moment. And I am very good with my anger. It's direct. It's to the point. It's factual. It's not nice sometimes, but it's still real. So if I didn't own that, then wouldn't that be disloyal to myself?
Well, sure. And I don't know where this whole, maybe it was 1976 and too many people watch Love Story, but that's a great notion. But, as I said before, the human mind doesn't know what reality is, and it's pretty selective. So going back to this concept of forgiveness, all the emotions we have are really, they're responses and reactions more pointedly. And in life, you can do one of two things. You can react, which is usually a knee-jerk reaction, or you can respond, which is something usually takes a little bit longer when you think things through. But when you've been through a situation or something, I've mentioned many times to you, I think, over the years that we've talked on and off the air about splinters. And I've been shown in my meditations and things that we all have them. They're just a metaphor, but you could be, the way you see the world, the way we all see the world, figured out by really smart people with more PhDs and, degrees than a thermometer. They say by the time we're 10 at the very latest, as early as 8, how we see the world's already set. And so our emotional view of the world is set at 8, and so when you're 47 and you're still an 8-year-old inside, they don't mesh because they don't line up. And so anything that's happened in our life that caused us pain, it could be the slightest word that we don't even remember, or some huge traumatic event like your parents got divorced or, your dog got run over. These all cause damages or splinters to go into us, and they go in deep. And then they stay there. And then through the course of life, they slowly work themselves to the surface. And when they get to the surface, one of two things happen. We freak out or we push them back in deeper. And most people don't spend the time when they get to the surface and something's going on. They don't spend the time, energy, or effort, nor do they know the process to actually extract those. They push them in deeper, different relationship, different job, alcohol, drug, you name it, shopping, I don't care. And so these splinters are working their way to the top, and it's not all of them have to do with forgiveness of how that thing happened to put them in there in the first place. An event, a person, a time, a place. And if we're not conscious of what actually happened, it's so scary and so angering to know that, why do I feel this way? And I don't even know what happened to me. And so forgiveness is a very blanket term, and it is something that has to be worked through, as you pointed out, in its own time. But the key thing in it, I believe, has worked for me, is to not see these things as accidents that happen, but incidences, and that all of it, the whole of it, if you can grasp this, think of the possibilities, which I know you can, that this is all happening for a reason. And that if you can understand it's happening for a reason to help me grow, help me change, help me become whole, be more like that which I came from instead of what I've become, then you look at those things and go, oh, this is a setup. You mean this happened when I was 8, so when I'm 48, I can understand myself better and those people, however it happened, and let it go. But until you get to the point where you think that if you're a victim and not a participant, you can't be both. If you're a victim of it or a participant in it, if you shift from victim to participant, everything in life changes. If you don't, nothing does.
That was great. That was great. We only have 2.5 minutes left in the show, and it's, we have lots to think about. I encourage people to go back into the archives after the show. It's posted right after the show, to download it and listen again, because you always hear something different that maybe didn't catch your ear the first time you listened. There's a lot of really good stuff in the show. We've talked about a lot. We've covered a lot. And I think we're going to have to do a part 2, because I have a whole sheet here of questions I wrote down as you were speaking. There's about 30 of them, and I won't be able to ask them. So I guess we're just going to have to do another show. So for Halloween, what are your plans? You have your cape, and you're going to go out and be a superhero and do some awesomeness?
Yes, I'm going to put my cape on, the one that you sent me. I have a red cape, and I have a big JSA on my blue tights, and I'm going to go out and fly around and make sure all the kids are safe and, take as much candy in payment as I can. Reese's Cups preferred.
And you should wear a GoPro camera.
Yes, I will get a GoPro. That'd be great.
Okay. And then you have to post a picture of you with your cape and your GoPro. I love it. Well, I want to say thank you, first of all, for taking time out and spending an hour with me on the air and talking about a great topic. And thank you for your perspective. I'm sure it absolutely helped a lot of people. I hope so. It's helped me. And thank you.
And it helped. And you're welcome. And it helps me because this helps resurrect that part of me that loves me, loves doing this with you, loves all this energy that's around it. And it gets resurrected. And it stays burning hot for a long time, and I may be putting it out, but it comes back to me as well. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.
Well, now you don't have an active show going on now, or do you? Where can people find you?
No, you know what? I've joined the blogosphere. I found that if I knock out 1,000 words, and I'm getting ready to do some audio blogs, which people will be able to hear my voice, and I'll be reading some of my stuff. But for now, I think the best way is johnstaugustine.com. And I love when people can hook up and subscribe to the blog. It's the most immediate way for me to get my thoughts out. And at this point, that's what I'm going to be doing. And we'll see what comes around later. I'll be where I'm supposed to be to do what I'm supposed to do when I'm supposed to do it.
Amen to that. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Happy Halloween. Stay safe, and I'll see you next week.